Hi guys, it's Michael here from Mind Performance Health, and today we are going to talk about the expectations on how to do a muscle building phase properly. Now please listen carefully and pay attention, as when I say a muscle building phase, I'm actually talking specifically in the point where we're going to be in a surplus of food to drive as much lean body mass as possible, but we got to expect a little bit of fat gain over that time. We want to limit that as much as possible. Now the question we get a lot is clients will come in and they wish to do a pure muscle building phase, okay? Or they're not sure also of when to do it or how to do it. So I'm going to cover that a little bit more specifically today on how to execute it properly and when to know the client is ready actually to do this building phase. They may need to go into a fat loss specific phase. They may need to hang around maintenance to recomp a little bit more. But you need to understand the expectations of when to execute this particular phase to get the outcome of building muscle. Now, like I just touched on, specifically in this phase, we're going to spend a bit of time in surplus calories, okay? So we're going to exceed energy balance here, so our maintenance. This is the amount of food or calories that's going to maintain our body composition. We want to be eating over that amount simply, so we have excess energy in there that's going to spill over more into lean body mass and drive more muscle growth due to more energy availability towards making that stimulus happen. Now, if we understand that, if the client's coming to you and they have excess body fat, they have just too much body fat, the question is, putting them into a building phase, is that really going to help them when they've already got a lot of body fat there? Because you need to understand, in a surplus of calories, there may be some spillover of body fat. So we want to manage expectations of the clients and make sure that this is actually going to be a realistic goal that they will be happy with. Like I touched on at the start as well, is you may have to get them leaner and then conduct a building phase specifically. Now, some simple ranges like this is males. You can see in photos and such, obviously, if they've got, they're lean, same with ladies as well. But males, preferably, if we can get to around, just throwing around numbers, 10% body fat before we even think about a building phase. And ladies, I would say in the lower 20s, at least percent of body fat before we even think about a building phase. Into the teens, that'd be a good point. But everyone's client specific with numbers as well, all right? So what my point is here, you want to be in a good position, because understand over time we're going to put body fat on and we want to limit that as slow as possible, but you're going to come up in body fat over time, and we want to have a good enough range so we don't have to cut the phase short. Okay, we don't want someone coming in that has just too much body fat. We've put them in a surplus of calories and they're just getting fatter and the physique just doesn't look as good. And then we've had to cut the building phase short due to much spillover. So that's very important to understand. So make sure your client is in position in a good enough body fat percentage levels so you've got room to come up with and to extend extended periods of time in this building phase to make sure it is successful. All right, it is successful, extremely important. Now, understand, like I touched on, we are going to have to be in a surplus of calories. So with that, there's certain markers you're going to need to assess weekly to make sure that your changes and adjustments are on point with nutrition and training, in line with gaining as much lean body mass as we can. That includes muscle mass, okay? So a good marker for this is once you know your maintenance calories, and a good way to know that is where your body fat percentage holds, your navel holds, your scale weight may also hold, and you're just keeping the same body composition. Once you have an idea of that point, you can make adjustments and changes to hit these progress markers. Now, there's a few KPIs or few markers that we look at in a specific building phase where we can make adjustments from. One of them is average scale weight. Another one will be body tape. Another one is body fat percentage and lean body mass as well. And obviously we have photos, okay? Now, with planning, with our sheets at Mind Performance Health, we set up targets over 12 weeks that include gaining targets. So as a coach, you would set up those targets. Now, knowing which setting up targets in a building phase to do, you can run off this kind of model. Average scale weight targets, a gain of 0.25 0.25 up to 1.5% gain a month, not a week, a month, is a great marker to work from. Now, what that means is say I'm 100 kilos, okay, if I want to go on the higher side of gain per month, that 1.5, well, I'd be looking at gaining, say, 1.5 kilos, okay, over time, all right, in a month, on that higher end side. But this is where it also comes important. So I've just given you an idea how you would plan that. More advanced trainees tend to move towards more on the lower side of this equation, so a slower rate of gain in the month. And more beginner trainees, beginner training age, where they haven't had the stimulus as much, will go on that higher rate of side of gain. So it's going to be up to your coaching eye and going off the client's history details to know whether they're more advanced, where you may move over to 0.25, but you might go 0.5 as well. Okay, it doesn't mean you just hold on 0.25, it's just within that range. Or if they're more beginner trainee, you would go on that higher side. So that's how you'll set up your markers, and then you know in a month you're aiming to achieve this average scale weight gain. So that's where you're taking, say, 7 days a week of scale weight, and you get an average marker at the end of 7 days. You're aiming to achieve that average mark trend of going up between this range in a month, okay? So to clarify again, if I'm 100 kilos, beginner training age, I'm a good body fat percentage. If I put it at 1%, I started in January, after 4 weeks coming to Feb, I would aim to put on 1 kilo. That's 1%, that's within that range. But once again, keep in mind the training age of the client and the stimulus that they've had before. Advanced on the lower side tends to be the spot, and more beginner training age on the higher side. So you would set up your markers and you would review your markers weekly. So you get your average trend of scale weight, review them weekly to make sure you are trending in the right direction. And if not, adjust the plan. You may need more calories, whether that's fats or carbohydrates in the plan, to hit your weekly markers. All right. Now, obviously, with weekly markers, this is going to chop this up. So if we're aiming for 1% a month, you might be aiming for 0.25% of your average weight gain per week over 4 weeks to come up to that point, okay? But you want to cross-reference and make sure you're trending in the right direction. So average scale weight is one marker to use in a building phase, okay? The other marker we want to make sure, because we're aiming here to put on as much muscle as we can, but also limit as much excess body fat as we can as well. We need to expect body fat gain to come up in a surplus, but we want to limit that as much as possible. If it comes up too quick, you will need to cut your building phase short, and you won't get the gains that you're looking for, okay? And you see it all the time when clients aren't tracking their calories properly. They're just eating a ton of food. They're getting bigger, but they're putting on a hell of a lot of body fat. And they would have got a lot bigger with their lean body mass and pure muscle if they went for an extended period of time and limited that body fat gain. So then the question becomes, we know our scale weight gain a month. How can we make sure that that scale weight coming up is mainly lean body mass and not just excess body fat coming up over time? How can we have a marker? There's a couple markers here that I would recommend to use. One of those is body tape. And circumferences, especially around the navel sites. So you can go the waist above navel, making sure that that is either coming up slowly or maintaining. We don't want it to come up too quick. So if you're coming up in scale weight over time and your body tape is holding around the navel site, that's one way we can assume that mainly the calories are coming in and improving your lean body mass and limiting as much body fat as possible. The other way is to do measurements such as skin folds, where we'll be able to assess body fat percentage and lean body mass as well. Now, that depends if you have access to skin folds to be able to do that test, okay? But obviously what we're looking at here is lean body mass coming up and body fat percentage either maintaining or slowly coming up to know if we're heading in the right direction alongside that scale weight gain over time. The other way too, which always is visual is best, is photos. Being picky with photos, same spot if you're taking it weekly, fortnightly, same position, and making sure, once again, that we're not getting a lot of spillover around the hips, the stomach, and that we're seeing details, especially if you're targeting certain areas of the body you wish to build, come up over time. All right, so to reinstate that, you have a few markers you can work from, but you need to assess them weekly and make sure that the details of navel, it's either slowly coming up or maintaining, body fat percentage slowly coming up or maintaining. Photos, you see some changes, and we are getting a gain in scale weight over time. They're the markers that I would recommend, but like I said, you need to assess them and pay attention to them quite often as the weeks go on, either weekly or fortnightly, to make sure you are adjusting to hit these targets over time. Otherwise, you're just guessing. So remember, it takes time. So if you're starting at 10% body fat, okay, as a guy, and we've started a building phase, a good target, you may have to do a mini cut every now and then. I'll touch on what that looks like later. But if you come up to 15% in the phase or 16% in the phase of body fat, all right, so it may have taken you 12 to 16 weeks to come up to 16%, but we've gained more muscle mass over that period of time. At this point, you'll need to make a decision either to do a mini cut, which will be 2 weeks at an aggressive deficit. Okay, so from maintenance, you may come down, say, could be anywhere from 20, say, to 40% even, so quite aggressive in a deficit, to tidy up the body fat levels and resensitize things like insulin so you can come back into a building phase and go longer in time. But if you come to a point where body fat's just gotten too high, you may need to reassess your goal, then go into a cutting phase because you've hit that limit, okay? Just understand it's best to spend periods of time either in a deficit for fat loss, not just quick aggressive, or spending times in a building phase to get the most out of it. Once again, create as much muscle you can, specifically in a building phase, okay? So pay attention to the details that are required when you're specifically trying to aim for certain goals of your training program. All right, now I just want to touch on two with adjustments. Now, say for instance, we're behind in our gain each week. So you were 75 kilos, and we were meant to be off our targets 75.5. You may need to make an adjustment with your nutrition. First, make sure everything's been compliant and consistent, but you may need to make an adjustment with your nutrition to hit that target, okay? So with that, you might come up in calories 10% for that week. Reassess what that change did with the targets that you've set up with your gain to make sure you've hit it. Now, if you've gone the opposite side where you've overshot your targets and we're putting on too much body fat too quickly and the navel sights are coming up too quickly, you may need to come down in that surplus. Okay, so you might have been too high with the calories that you set up. So you might have to adjust things to come down, so slow that rate of body fat down as well. So I just wanted to touch on this as it's extremely important that you don't just set this up, but make the necessary adjustments to hit your targets. Okay, so if you're low, you may need to come up in food to hit your targets. If you've gone too high and you're putting on too much body fat too quickly, you may need to decrease the calories. Once again, given compliance and consistency is in check, to get back in check with your targets. Okay, you got to keep sailing that ship in the right position.